Yo, you know how some conversations don't just speak to you, but instead they're reaching to you? In this episode right here, on the Prison to Promise podcast, I'm interviewed by Dr. Erin Parish Mitchell of the Human Kindness Foundation for a powerful dialogue on pain, accountability, and healing, as well as transformation. Together, me and Erin explore what it means to face our wounds, shift our thinking, and discover the promise within. Yo, this ain't just a conversation, but instead it's an invitation. This is the Prison to Promise podcast. Now let's go.
Okay, so first of all, it's been a real pleasure prepping for this and spending this time in your mind and how no, seriously, and just like how you process things. Because I feel like you might be like me of like thinking through writing and like just kind of processing your ideas. And so that's been really fun. And I wanted to interview you for this chapter on healing because I feel like a lot of your healing work that I have seen and like read about and heard about feels like it's not just about you, but is also intergenerational and societal, that there's like a societal dimension to it. Um, and so I wanted to start off our conversation talking about trees and branches because I know you love trees and you chose for your cover of your book to have
Yeah.
you under a tree, under a branch, wearing a shirt of a tree with a DNA helix. And so I just wanted to start off by asking you, like, what do trees mean to you? And why did you choose that to be how you wanted to represent yourself in your story?
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me here. You're the first person who's broke that down like that. No one else has ever like pointed that out. But that was intentional. Um, but trees mean life to me. Trees mean connectivity. Trees mean family, community to me. They represent strength. They represent care. They represent experience and wisdom. Yeah. Bob Marley sang in one of his songs, he said, some are leaves and some are branches. But I and I are the roots. Some are dry wood for the fire, but I and I are the roots. And so, um, to end my thought about trees, I'd say that trees represent connectivity, and life is connectivity, and all those things that I mentioned um, are all connected in my mind and in my experience.
I have this talking stick
Yeah,
that I bring to all the work that I do in the prison.
yeah,
And the guy who taught me how to make this talking stick, we foraged for wood in his, it was like on his property. And
yeah,
he said to find a branch that had a wound because the wound is where the greatest beauty lies, but you have to like work with it and tend it in order to find the beauty in that wound and basically like with a story that that wound has to tell. So I guess I'm curious to hear from you what wounds you feel in your life that you've turned into beauty and like how you've worked to turn your pain into purpose.
yeah, yeah, man, that's heavy too. Um, I have lots of wounds or scars, uh, physically as well as emotionally, metaphorically. Um, but I think the deepest wound or the earliest wound was being sexually assaulted as a child. and not knowing that I had been violated, but yet knowing, if that makes sense. As a child, too young to articulate the harm that had been visited upon my body, but yet somehow intrinsically knowing it, you know, at a nervous and a subconscious level beyond articulation at that time. I think that's the earliest wound. And I think turning that into purpose meant acknowledging it,
Mm,
really understanding what happened to me. And that understanding didn't occur until I was initially in a prison cell, just newly admitted to the Department of Corrections, and standing in the middle of this cell looking around and asking myself, how the fuck did I get here? What the fuck went wrong in your life, dude? And it was at that point I began to really just peel back the layers. And I said, oh shit, I was sexually assaulted. That's why I was angry all these years. That's why I was afraid all these years. That's why I was ashamed all these years. And all the bullshit that I was engaging in and manifesting was a reflection of that anger, fear, and shame. So that had to be around 1990 when I came into this realization. And it was from that point that I just began to acknowledge all my scars
mm.
and to work on being at peace with myself and healing from those things so that I could be comfortable in my skin and comfortable within the recesses or just the space of my cognitive being, just comfortable with me. And so it took a lot of work, a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of conversation, crucial conversation, crucial reading, crucial writing. And I think I've since gotten through that pain. That's why I can talk about it like now. Um, and I use that to, I think, just have greater empathy towards people who I work with in the work that I do, um, especially men, because I know there's a large percentage of men who had been sexually assaulted as children who still are unable to come to terms with that. And so because of that, um, their behavior is still, for lack of a better term, colored bad, you
Mm.
know? They're still not engaging in fully healthy behaviors towards themselves or others. I hope that answers that question or speaks to it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think to rewind, if you were able to go back to like 5, 6, 7-year-old
Mhm,
Craig,
mhm.
what did you need? What would you have wanted for you? Like, what
Yeah,
would you have needed to be able to be heard at that moment? And it's in a moment in which you didn't even have the words to
yeah.
tell the story.
Oh, what would I have needed? Probably just more time and attention with and from my caregivers. Um, just to add some color to that, I was raised by just my mom, and my aunt would help sometimes, but this was after I think I had been assaulted that my aunt came into the picture. So it was mostly my mom and my sister who was 13 years older than me. Um, and mom worked. We had house, car, clothes, physical trappings, any family needs, but I didn't have time and attention and
oversight. So that's what I mean by time and attention. Um, I think that during those era in that era, that's what I would have needed. Um, there wasn't a whole lot of talk or investment in psychotherapy, emotional therapy. This was in the 70s, the early 70s. And then plus black folk wasn't fucking with, these shrinks and whatnot. But so I think that that's probably what I would have needed, more time and attention and less Jesus. They beat me in the head with Jesus. Um, yeah. And as I grew older, I became angry and defiant. And so my mom, my aunts, my cousins, the people in my mother's church, they just tried to tube feed me Jesus, you know, but that wasn't doing anything to heal the wounds that I didn't know at that point I had. But my mother knew. My brothers knew of one incident. My brothers are 14 and 15 years older than me. Say I was maybe 3, these guys were maybe like 17, 18 years old, and they knew of the one perpetrator because there were 2 people at separate times in my life who assaulted me. But the first time I had to be about maybe 2, maybe 3, and my brothers found out about it, and I learned this years later that my brothers found out about it, and they wanted to kill the guy, literally kill him. Um, I'm glad they didn't because I wouldn't have them in my life. I wouldn't be the person I am today without my brothers. But they were bent on killing a person. But that wouldn't have helped. Time and attention, I think, is what I would have needed. And as I grew, maybe patience and empathy instead of Jesus and a belt.
Mm. I mean, that gets into the culture, right? And I think, like, how is the culture that we live in, how does this affect our healing or cause us trauma, right? And that was something I was really taken by of how you described the low expectations that society had for, or like, I don't know if I want to say, I do want to say low expectations that society had for Black boys and Black men, that it was like you have a path to a specific kind of glory that's going to be locking you up, right? And that really shaded how you saw your potential,
Mhm.
and where you were gonna end up and what you were gonna do in life. And
Yeah.
so, did did you find those societal expectations, I guess, to be traumatic to yourself?
When I think about it and look back on it, I have to say, yeah. Um, During the formative years, I had no idea of the word trauma or what it meant. But as I look back on it, yeah, it was quite traumatizing to me psycho emotionally, from the time that probably I could first conceive of the veiled messages that society had for me, until maybe some point during my incarceration when I began to gain liberation while incarcerated, you know, the psychological liberation. But yeah, quite traumatic, I would think. Because trauma is harm, and these concepts or ideas about the place or limitation of black men and boys or people definitely uh, has been and still is harmful. And during those times were very harmful to me.
I think, like, another theme that I consistently
Mhm.
see as you talk, right, is flipping the script, right? And I guess, like, how did you see education and specifically learning about African and African American histories of excellence as a way to flip that script? And how was that a way for you to understand yourself and your capacity for resilience better.
Will you state that question again?
Yeah. So, how did you find, do you find that education and specifically your process of learning about African and African American histories of excellence, is this healing to you?
Yeah. Yeah, Aaron, totally, totally healing. Because as I learned about African and African American excellence, that's when the true educational process began for me. Um, Looking at the word education, looking at the etymology of education, educere, which is to bring forth that which is within, to bring forth that which is latent. Um, when I began to learn about those different people and characters and events, I began to realize that that same potential was within me, i.e., bringing forth that which was latent, bringing forth that which was within, becoming educated, knowing about my potential, my proclivities, the history of my people, which was totally contrary to what I'd been taught growing up, i.e., the trauma, the harm, you know, uh, that was happening, that was downplaying my potential. But once I learned about those things, those people, yeah, I could see myself in that lineage, in that line of Black excellence and intellectualism and achievement. And yeah, so that was the educational process for me. I've always been a reader, even when I was like a child and a young man, hanging out in the streets and doing all the bullshit. I always had like a book or a magazine or something in my pocket, in my bag. So always well read, um, but ignorant as fuck. Um,
Mm,
that makes sense because I was uneducated. I had no knowledge of my potential.
mm,
You know, I just thought I was going to be what they, meaning society, wanted me to be, which was essentially a nigger,
mm.
you know? But I realized I'm way more.
I really found it so touching to picture like 19-year-old, 20-year-old Craig just like reading about Egypt and reading about like astronomy and math. I just found it so touching, and there were a lot of, like, quotes and stories that were really touching, but this particular quote really, really moved me, and you said, "One of the things that also really helped me understand my potential and my ability was when I started really reading about the transatlantic slave trade and how enslaved Africans were brought over here in the hulls to the United States, brought here in the hulls of ships as captives of war and enslaved. During that journey from Africa to the Caribbean islands in the bottoms of ships, thousands of them died in that transition. But at the same time, thousands survived. Probably more died than survived. But of those who survived, I am their offspring."
Yeah.
And it was only in prison that you came to connect to these histories of both suffering and survival. And you were like flipping the script. You were seeing that, like, within one thing is also the other. Within the suffering is also a story of like amazing survival. And you were reading like histories of revolution and empowerment, like the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I just like, why do you think it was only in prison that you were able to learn about these histories of survival and creation and that it would have such a strong impact?
Hearing you read back those words bring tears to my eyes, but not of sadness, but just, I don't know. It's not a sad tear. I'm just moved. What was your question again? I forgot it just like that.
That is, why do you think it was only in prison
Right, right.
that that these stories had such an impact? And
Yeah.
especially with that quote, it's like,
Huh?
you're sitting here in this, like, modern day slave ship or this modern day plantation. You are
Yeah,
brought in this bus in the modern day slave ship to the
yeah,
modern day plantation, and
uh-huh,
it's there where you're like, "Wow, but I am of a lineage of survival." And that's a very active choice
yeah,
you made to not be like, "I am a lineage of slaves. I am a
yeah,
lineage of survivors."
yeah, 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 and I think maybe because I was in an oppressive situation where it really resonated with me, and I could see the parallels between my current situation of being in prison and that of an enslaved person living in a cell or the hull of a ship or a slave hut with overseers who are threatening their welfare and their life if they don't comply. So I think just being in a very parallel situation um made it hit that much harder. Um but prior to going to prison, I had known some of these stories, from the folks that helped raise me, some of the men and women in my family. Um but it didn't hit me the same for whatever reason. But yeah, I think it was just being a captive at that time allowed me to see it more, allowed it to mean more to me, you know. But
What role do you think your ancestors played in your healing?
well, I think you mentioned part of it, which was that those who survived, as well as those who did not, um, that strength, that fortitude, it doesn't go anywhere. It's an energy, it's an attitude, it's a perspective that spans generations. Um, and so I think because my ancestors were the progenitors of the human family, I think that all of us, any one of us, no matter what ethnicity we come from, I think that we have that same quality to survive. This is why humans are who we are anyway. But I think knowing the story of survival of Africans throughout the diaspora, um, is just that much more impactful for me. It's like I know they did it. They survived. And so if they survived, I can survive. If they did not survive, I wouldn't be here. So I must survive is my attitude, um, and my approach to being resilient. Because if I don't survive, then that sets the next generation up for failure. I have to survive. And survival is not just a matter of being strong, it's sometimes of being weak as well, you know, but surviving. And in that weakness is the strength as well.
You're constantly flipping the script, you know? No, I mean, I really love the way you think, because I'm hearing this, it's really consistent because, like, the constant kind of theme is, like, you already and this is, like, so core to what I believe is, like, you already have within you all of the things that you need to be the greatest version of yourself, but
Absolutely.
we have to, we have to be able to trigger those things and activate those things, and I do think it takes, like, a community to
Yeah.
be able to activate and pull forth
Yeah.
all of these pieces, but it's this
Yeah.
constant kind of perspective of how you understand education and are looking at education as bringing forth that which is latent, but it's coming out as well with, like, how you understand lineages of, like,
Mm,
strength and survival, so it's really beautiful, and I'm hearing, like, this consistent echo and chorus of, like, this one sort of, melody or beat or theme.
mm. Thank you. And you mentioned too, like this how we have all that we need inside of us. And yes, I believe that. And we can take it back to the origin of our conversation about the trees. And here we have the tree, the 20-foot, 80-foot, whatever, but it started out as just this little seed with everything it needed inside of it to be what it is. But in order for it to grow like that, just like us, it needed the right environment, the right community, the right nutrition, you know. And so we're related in that sense. We grow just as they grow, and we die just as they die.
Can you tell me about your last name and how you chose your
Mhm.
last name when you were in
Yeah,
prison and what that meant to
yeah,
you?
yeah. So my name was given to me by
Mm,
some men that I studied with, older men that I studied with back in the days. And they gave me the name Akil Waleed. Akil means intelligent, one who uses reasoning well. And Waleed means newborn or born again. And so that name, Akil Waleed, paired with my first name, my given name, which is Craig, reads that Craig or the rock,
mm.
because Craig comes from the word crag, which is Scots Irish for rock, steep, precipitous rock. So the rock is intelligent and reborn. But the rebirth is not just in 1990 or yesterday. The rebirth is daily. It's a daily death and rebirth. Always trying to be aware or receptive to where I may have come up short or missed the beat or missed the mark, and trying to do better the next day. Always trying to improve, always trying to be a better version of who I was yesterday. So that's the constant death and rebirth. But Waleed is Arabic, and it means, yeah, newborn or reborn.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, love it. So another theme that I heard, and okay, it's the same theme. It's the same theme, and it's like everything is within. So when you flip the script, you're just like turning over at the other side of the coin, but the coin is the same
Mhm.
thing. You're just looking at it a different way. But it seems like one of your big realizations you had in prison was that you were there because of your thinking,
Yeah,
and that meant that your thinking could get you out of the
yeah.
situation as well. So, can you talk a little bit more about what this shift in thinking entailed, like what it looked like, and what happened when you shifted the way you thought?
Yeah. So there's a passage in the Bible, in the book of Proverbs, that reads, "As a man thinketh, so is he." And then in the 1920s, a guy named James Allen wrote this book called As a Man Thinketh. And I think it's pretty much based off of that same principle. Um, but yeah, I know and I understand that cognizant, conscious beings are not on autopilot.
Hmm.
Even when we think we're on autopilot, there is some sort of thinking that's going into our behavior. And so I had to ask myself at some point, um, how did my thinking get so tainted that I thought it's okay to hurt people and take from people? Um, and when I realized that my own pain, my own trauma, my own survival made me think this way or conditioned me to think this way. When I realized that, um, that's when I understood that things happened that shaped my thinking. I can now dictate to some degree what happens to reshape my thinking, only because I understood how my thinking had been shaped. But again, it was by forces that I had no power over. So once I understood that the things that I pour into my mind, the things that I watch, listen to, gauge in, those shape how I think, and my thinking is manifested through my behavior. And so I want to change my behavior. So how do I change my behavior? Change my thinking. How do I change my thinking? Put new shit in my head. And so I went on this, and I'm still on this voyage. I still put some bullshit in my head, but for the most part, I try to protect my ears and eyes against what I see and hear. And that's what I did in prison. So I spent a lot of time with older men who mentored me. I spent a lot of time studying all types of stuff. I spent a lot of time by myself as much as I could in prison, by just running around the yard and doing solo workouts and not spending some days just like this is the day I don't talk. I don't say anything because I just want to listen to myself. So understanding, how my thoughts are formed and their connection to behavior. And then later understanding how thinking and behavior and emotion together are what really color behavior. And once I learned the emotional piece and began going down that rabbit hole, I began to better shape and direct my thinking and behavior.
That was actually my next question is like, how would you answer that with feelings?
Yeah.
Uh, but that makes a lot of sense. And I guess like with the being able to shift your thinking, it feels really powerful and important. So correct me if I'm wrong in how I'm understanding this, but it seemed like you had to really understand the root causes of your thinking
Yep.
in order to shift it.
Yep. Absolutely. When I was a kid, my mom used to have me working in her gardens and whatnot, and in the yard, pulling up dandelions and shit. And sometimes I would just pull the flower, then the root would grow back. And she taught me, no, you gotta get it at the root. If you don't get it at the root, the ugly shit gonna grow back and choke out the beautiful shit. And so that's the same with thinking and behavior. We have to go to the root. We have to understand how it started, why it started, what happened, and explore that. But looking at what happened and how shit starts can be painful. It can be
Mhm.
arduous. Um, and I think that's why maybe lots of people don't do it.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Give me a beer, give me a shot, give me a joint, and I don't have to deal with that shit.
Yeah. When, as you were going through this or any time during this process or afterwards, I know that you are a restorative practice, you're trained in restorative practices. Did you ever go through any restorative process with your victims? And like, do you think that the process of harming others caused you harm?
So I never went through restorative practices with my victims. I think during that era of the 90s, there may have been minimal or no mention or true knowledge of that on a larger scale, though we know it's been around for generations. Um, so no. Plus, I had a court mandate to not be in contact with the people I violated. So that has never happened. Um, I forgot your second part.
Well, I guess in thinking through these processes of things that you have to heal from,
Uh,
I'm curious of your thoughts of how causing harm to others is something we have to heal from. Like,
absolutely.
do you feel like causing harm to others harms us?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, and we hear the saying, and I don't think it's just chat that hurt people, because it's real. Hurt people, and the more hurt people hurt others, I think the deeper embedded does the initial pain become, but not just that. I think, yeah, we become harmed because we traumatize ourselves when we traumatize others because we're not meant to suffer trauma, you know? I can't say we're not meant to because who the fuck am I? But, you know, trauma has an impact on us, a negative impact on us. And if I hurt someone, I'm not only witnessing trauma, I'm carrying it out. I'm the vehicle of it. So hell yeah, it's gonna hurt.
What do you feel like your process was from healing from that harm?
So what I know is that during those years in my life, I still believe that there was a God. And so one of the things I did is I prayed and I asked this God to forgive me. This was the same God though that allowed me to become victimized as a child. Um, but I was still in this place of darkness, maybe still triple stages of darkness, deaf, dumb, and blind. Um, but I think it started there, with me just really admitting, maybe just to myself, but I thought it was to God, my sense of remorse and shame for harming someone else. Um, I think that that's where it began. But also making a vow to myself that I'd never harm anyone else, at least knowingly. I'd never raise my hand to another person. I'd never point a weapon or engage a weapon at another person. So making that vow and expressing remorse and then doing the work that I have committed myself to doing by trying to help other people heal. And that's been for the last 25 or 30 years. So I think those three things speak to my processes. And the process is ongoing and I'll probably never stop that process, until the day my casket drops.
I mean, would you say that's the process of healing from any kind of pain is an ongoing process?
I think so. I think so. Especially when it comes to, the pain of violence, the harm of violence, be it physiological or psychological, violence. Certain harms, I think maybe we can get over them, but once we see the scar, we relive the situation. It may not have the same impact, but, like, I could look on my leg right now, I have a scar from when I was 7 years old. It don't hurt me the same psychologically, but I still remember the incident. And it wasn't pleasant, so
I mean, there's that whole like and I think back to the talking stick, right?
yeah,
That trauma is this wound, but this wound that if we care for it
mhm,
can tell a story,
yeah,
right? And can be a source of connection. Because I think that a lot of times trauma, when we can't put a story around it, is a source of disconnection. So, like your early childhood trauma, you couldn't put a story around that because you were just a baby, you know?
right,
And so you couldn't like, you didn't have a way to understand it for yourself or a way to connect with others with shared pain, you know what I mean? So you had to get to a point where were able to acknowledge that this happened, which is the same kind of starting point you had to get to find a way to heal from causing harm to others. And it's all so connected, you know?
mhm,
Like, if you've been able to tell that story and been protected, I never would have hurt anybody, you know? So that space of, like, what do we do with our wounds? Um, they're also connected to each other.
yeah, it's like going back to the trees
Yeah.
and going, like, on a deeper level, there's roots, but the roots are connected because of the mycelium.
Yeah.
That's the connective tissue between the roots, just like, I guess, between our synapses, there's dendrites, you know, and that's what makes the connection, the in between material.
Mm. So the idea of promise, I think, is another thing that this I mean, it's all so connected because that's what the educare and the things that are latent, that's promise, right? And you just have to, like, be able to flip that switch and, like, thinking about these connections and the synapses and the dendrites, like, they're not always turned on. And
Yeah.
so it's like, what is this work that we do in our life or we do as a community to turn all of these, like, good things on so that we're the strongest versions of ourselves? And this is okay, so this is a quote about promise that we've talked about this some, but, I just think it's so beautiful, and it's just so tied into what I believe, so maybe that's why I think it's so beautiful, but all of us are born with promise. All of us are born with gifts and talents. But because of the environments, family circumstances we come from, or the trauma that we suffered, which is most of us in prison have suffered some sort of trauma, if not multiple, that promise, those gifts that we have sometimes get buried or stifled or suffocated under the weight of all that ish that we're carrying around. So, in this quote, what I hear is both the pain of wasted promise and the power of promise fulfilled.
Mhm.
And I hear this referring to individual and societal promise.
Mm,
So, we've talked a lot about your healing journey,
mm.
but I'd be curious of what you think about, like, what kind of healing journey do we as a society need to undertake in order to recognize and nurture the gifts and the talents of all people?
I think like Germany, like Norway, those societies place an emphasis on acknowledging the humanity and the dignity of each individual. So I think that in saying that, I think that what needs to happen initially, and I don't have the whole thing thought out, but I think that we have to first acknowledge, as a nation, the harm that has been brought onto other groups of people, i.e., Black Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, women, of all ethnic backgrounds. Um, I think we have to first acknowledge the harms that we have and continue to perpetuate, have done and continue to perpetuate. I think that that's a great starting place. And with that, um, we would start acknowledging the humanity of each person, not just cisgendered white men.
That's really like that's you've said acknowledgement in each space of thinking about like your own process of understanding harm that happened to you, understanding harm that you caused to others, and then thinking about societal harm. So that's very consistent.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so then how would you say that the lessons you've learned from hard life experiences shaped how you parent your sons and the kinds of men you're raising them to be?
How do use my hard life experiences to help raise and parent my sons?
The lessons you've learned from your hard
Since
life experiences.
Yeah.
And the good ones too, but
Yeah.
yeah, just talking about
Yeah.
pain
I
into
I
purpose.
I think I take everything and try to flip it into good.
Yeah.
You know, when I was growing up, there were kids who lived in my neighborhood and who may not have had the best means of maybe washing their clothes or having many pairs that they can change in and out of. So sometimes kids would take their shirt and turn it inside out and wear it again, and so, or take their pants or whatever. And so I try to do that with my life's experiences. Um, they're mine, and so I can't shake them. So what I do is I try to turn them inside out and wear them again.
Mm.
So when I think about my sons, I try to think about the hardships that I experienced because of the things I did not have. And I try to make sure that they have those things that they need in order to make the best decisions for themselves. Um, I try to raise independent and um, um, analytical boys who think about the world and think about their lives. One of the things I often do is I quote the late great American poet DMX daily to my kids. Yeah, always ask them, remind them to make good decisions because bad decisions lead to last decisions. That was DMX. Bad decisions leads to last decisions. Now your ass is missing. You know? That's DMX for you. But yeah, so I really try to help them make the best decisions. And earlier in our conversation, we talked about decision making and replacing poor decision making with better decision making, and that comes to from having exposure, exposing your ears and eyes to things that are healthy. So I try to make sure that they're exposed to the healthiest environments. That I can, be that here in the house, when I send them to school, who their friends are, what comes out of my mouth when they're around, places I take them, won't take them, all of that. But it's really just about helping them to be responsible decision makers at the end of the day.
So, if you could design a community that was set up to help people to heal from past trauma and to recognize and nurture the talents that lie within them. So, let's say your own personal educare community,
Mhm.
what would that look like?
Shit. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think one thing though, it would have a celebratory tone, but it would also have a quiet tone, just kind of still in a sense, a place where people can feel secure, and not just secure in their body, but secure in who they are psychologically, emotionally, so that they can explore um, perhaps what their gifts and talents are. There would need to be, yeah, it would be safe. That's all I could really say at this point. It would just be a safe and brave space
Mm.
for people to be who they need to be without having to worry about, am I, fitting correctly into this box that society has set up for me as a woman, a man, a boy, a girl, black, white, whatever, you know. I'm just me and I want to be me, you know, whatever that is. So it would be a safe and brave space.
Love it. So, do you have any advice to others who are undertaking their own healing journey, be it in prison or on the outside?
Yeah. Go forth bravely.
Mm.
Be not afraid. And finally, keep an open mind. You have to be willing to hear what's being said. Bob Marley sang for us, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds.
I was feeling so stressed out yesterday, and I just went on like a full Bob Marley binge. I listened to Natural Mystic and Reggae Vibrations over and over again.
Nice.
Like, I just need to change my mental frequency right now.
Oh, yeah. You need to you need to get amongst the trees.
I know. I
You
know.
you
Yeah.
need to find a forest to just go walk in and on the trees.
Yeah. Yeah. You were
I
right.
wish you healing.
Thank you. Is there anything left to say that has not been said yet in this conversation?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because I wasn't really sure where this conversation was going, Again, I just trusted you, my friend.
How did this conversation land for you? Because we talked about some like hard stuff and good stuff. So how did it land?
Nothing was hard.
Okay.
Um, yeah, nothing was hard. Um, I think every area that we touched are areas that I've walked through multiple times in my I've healed and I've gone back and I've touched the keloids, put lotion and
Mm.
cocoa butter on them, so I'm good.
Good.
Oh,
Good. I just want to check in.
I appreciate it, my friend.
Yeah, of
Appreciate it.
course. Of course. Well, I appreciate you. It has been just like really fun to just like get a better sense of like how you think and how you tick. So I just
Yeah.
appreciate you as a person and that you're putting this stuff out in the world too. And just like your journey has been really inspiring to me in thinking about the kinds of work that we can do as an organization. And, are there ways that we can get more content out to the way I've been thinking about us and the way I described our work, and we're all doing time I had my first revisions group with some of the guys at Orange Correctional, and I was like, this is a book for the thirsty, but they deserve a better drink. We need to be able to make this better because
Mhm.
we're sending it out to folks who are thirsty. I think that's one of the and I see that, oh my gosh, there's this guy in my group, and this kid is brilliant. He just reminds me so much of my son. He was probably, like, a lot like you. He's, like, 24, so smart, so smart. He just got his GED, I'm so proud of him, but this kid is, like, could totally be a professor, and he's thirsty, and so he's just getting all this content from Adovo, and I'm like, "Okay, what else could we get there for, like, thirsty people that is really liberatory?"
Yeah, but we need to make the drink better. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I appreciate you being on this journey of making a better drink.
All right. Thanks, Doc.
Cool. Take
All
care.
right. You be well.
You too.
Peace.
Bye.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for hanging out with me for another episode of the Prison to Promise podcast. If you or someone you know would like to share their Prison to Promise story on this platform, please hit me up at drcraigwaleed@gmail.com. I'll spell it for you. That's DrCraigWaleed@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Peace.